So you became tech lead in 3 years and had one of the most accelerated career.
And the problem with big tech, especially seeing a lot of these layoffs, is majority of the existing way of leadership, I think, is fundamentally flawed.
For every promotion on a scale of 0 to 10, how much was luck? How much was smart work? How much was hard work? So hello everyone, today we have someone who needs very little introduction because he's someone who is first of all an engineer, an extremely rare engineer you have seen because he got first of all tech lead position at Google within 3.5 years. He got extremely rare promotions that are possible, almost impossible, but he made it possible at Google because he is among the 2% of Google employees who were able to get the highest performance review twice at Google. So, hi Akash, can you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks a lot for the kind words. That I really don't think I am deserving of all of those things. But yeah, my name is Akash. I currently lead the security team here at Apple AIML. Before joining Apple, I was the tech lead of Chrome infrastructure security team, where I spent about 4 years um, leading work in Chrome's infrastructure space for especially focusing on the security, particularly. Um, I think of myself as a mathematics lover and a security nerd, and I love dogs. I have a golden retriever.
Incredible. So let's start with every engineer struggle. Whenever they join a big tech company, they get so overwhelmed with huge code bases. So you also wrote in your blogs that, whenever an engineer joins, there are millions or even up to like billions of lines of code you see. And especially at a big company like Google, they have like internal tools for pretty much everything. They have internal tool for GitHub. So everything is internal, and you get very overwhelmed and you have kind of a imposter syndrome you develop when you reach big tech companies. Can you share how you overcome?
Yeah. I mean, imposter syndrome is definitely one of the most common feeling, whether you want to join a big tech or any other company, to be honest. And I will start by one thing, right? Like, my transition have been coming from a startup. So I started off working as first few engineers at a startup that we started out of LA. Spent about 2 years there, didn't work out. So I moved to the Bay Area and worked at companies of less than 2000 people, like startups, and then a mid-tier company. And that's when I transitioned into Google. And the difference that was, like, it's not to discount all the work that I have done before. All of those were great, and, like, great learning experience for me. However, the biggest problem at Google was, like, everything was, like, scaled up, right? Like, before I was working for, let's say, a million users, now it was billion all of a sudden. And when it changes from that 1 million to 1 billion, a lot of things break. A lot of the assumptions that we make while writing the software doesn't work anymore. So that when you get to that environment where you see all of these smart people all around you, like, making changes left and right, and it takes you a whole day to make a simple change in front of them, which would probably take 5 minutes for other engineers who are at the same level. uh, it is not a great feeling, let me tell you that. I'm pretty sure you have experienced some of those as well. But the biggest problem, like you identified, right? Like, the code base, the internal tools, these things are completely different. And these are some of those things, like, you can't know until you get there. So, as engineers, I think we are by nature curious animals. I don't want to call us humans animals, but yeah, basically, we are curious in nature. What that means is we are always looking for answers, and we judge ourselves too quickly. So, when we see others contribute very fast and we can't, in those situations, what tend to happen, we judge ourselves as not deserving. So that's where the source of imposter syndrome comes in. And I had very strong imposter syndrome when I joined, because it would take me days to understand the problem when someone else is repeatedly, explaining this. So fortunately, I had a very great manager who broke down a problem, a list of key people to talk to, all of those things. Still, I was clueless for the whole first month that I was there. I had no clue what I was working on. I had no clue why I was working on what. And it is not on anyone but me, because at that point I think I was focusing a lot more on what others can do versus what I can learn. So I think that's fundamental shift in thinking made a very big difference when I started recognizing, okay, these are the folks that have been here for 3 years, 5 years, seven, and a couple of the folks that I learned a lot from at Google were there for like more than 10 years. And if I immediately started comparing myself with them, it was just not fair. So slowly I started developing this appreciation. Okay, I did something right. That's how I got in. Now, what I need to do is learn as much as I can from all of these brilliant people all around me. So that's how I like to think about, you are the average of the people, you are the sum total of the people and their experiences that you learn or learn from. This is where learning code bases of millions or billions of line. The funny story is the first problem that I was my starter project, the code base that it covered was about 100 million lines or something like that. And it is not humanly possible to go through all of those things. So what ends up happening is Google is generally a monolithic repository, but in Chrome's side, since it's open source, it's broken down into multiple repositories. And what ends up happening, there's just intrinsic connections that you just develop over time. It's a kind of a tribal knowledge that you get to build as you work on the code base. So that was definitely non-existent for me when I went in. I would see my mentors connect these dots. Okay, this particular function, so that is this is written this way because that repository dictates how this should look like, and things like that. So slowly going over, I think the first 6 months were definitely very difficult, but having that fundamental mindset shift that I mentioned before, you are there because you did something right, and now it's your job to make yours improve yourself, learn on the job, learn about what all the internal tools and whatever is available to you at that point, and make use of it instead of this self judgment. And the other part that becomes really strong in imposter syndrome, to be honest, is when you're communicating with someone as a new employee, you always feel you are being judged. And I have been on both sides. I have been the new employee who had feared speaking to someone, asking questions, and I have been the tech lead who onboarded a bunch of people when they joined our team, right? So at that situation, what I felt like, I was not judging for a single second of any of them. And that was probably the exact same thing when I was the new person. That person in front of me wasn't judging me. So it was my mind all along. So having that understanding going in, I think it's a bit counterintuitive. However, if someone is joining at a any large organization or any other size of organization, to be honest, you should always feel the all the doubts and questions that you have in your mind is in your mind. It's not in the mind of the person in front of you.
Very well said, because even in your blogs, you have mentioned that a manager can make or break your experience. 5 out of 10 times, people leave not their companies, they leave their managers, as you said. So, can you share in that scenario, the only way people suggest is hard work is the only way to get over any problem. Elon Musk has said that if you work 80 hours a week, you can achieve double of what people achieve in just 40 hours. Do you also believe in the same notion?
That's an interesting notion, to be honest. If I'm thinking about it, 80 hours per week, 40 hours is about 8 hours a day, right? So 80 hours roughly is gonna be about 14 hours even if you stretch it to weekends. Otherwise, 16 hours a day on the weekdays. And while I'm very insignificant in front of Elon Musk, he has accomplished so many things, and I do agree with a lot of the things that he has to say. However, I think in this particular space, my thought process is a little different. And how I think about it is if you look at any typical engineer's day, even though it's 9 to 5, 8 hours of the job, but I would be very surprised if an engineer is spending more than 4 hours actually working. And the rest 4 hours is basically not like, there are many things that can be done. Like, for example, at Google, one of the things that we used to do was there was this meme place, hangout place where, all the Googlers would go and like, a meme about stuff, work and whatnot. So I used to spend a good amount of time there just for refreshments. And there's this conversations that happens with your coworkers. There's this meetings that happens. There's this planning, and all of those things combined. That's what makes an engineer's 8 hours day. So I tend to think about this more in terms of focus rather than the hours. So if you can, I think the entirety of my 4 year journey, if you see, it's as compared to the average, it's an accelerated career that I had, fortunately, and the opportunity that I was given. But I have never worked more than 8 hours a day, if you count. Maybe the hours were spread across the day, but never more than 8 hours. And the 8 hours that I would work, I would optimize for focus. So I would always like, whenever cutting down on distractions, a simple trick that my manager, like, when I joined Google, within 2 months, we went to like, work from home due to the pandemic and whatnot. At that point, there was a period of like, 2 weeks or 3 weeks, I was really struggling to work because I came to realize that like, if you never leave your bed, your mind does not work or prepares itself as like, in that work zone. So I set up my desk in my living room, and that helped a lot in terms of focus. So reducing distractions, reducing like, taking care of the some of these mental things can increase your focus. And if you can, I can promise you this: if you can give 4 hours of focus every day for 5 days a week, as an engineer, you'd already be at more than 98 percentile of engineers, and you'd get like, good ratings left and right. There is no need to work for 80 hours.
What things you did extra in that focus time and how you removed all the distractions to be impact minded, because at the end of the day what gives you promotion are two things, as you said: impact and budget to have promotion.
Yeah, so I think focus is something that you can do on your part. And the other part that is interesting, if I read your question right in this conversation, is like, beyond how do you stay focused, number one, and how do you create that environment to be able to like, focus on your work and focus on the impact, right? So in that sense, like, let's cover the first part. Like, we touched on this a little bit, like, how do you create an environment where you can focus? So right now I think it's getting a little easier, having some of the companies opening up offices. If you have if you live in a home with roommates or your spouse or significant other, or distractions like myself, like, I have a dog who never leaves me. So in those situations, you can always go to office for some quiet hours, like, go for 4 hours every day if you like. That's your choice, right? So some of these things that you can do, or if you can afford to have like, create an environment which is completely distractionless. Some of these things also include having a clutter-less desk. I think this is not just me. This is something that I copied or learned from very, very, big leaders. Like, Sundar Pichai talks about this as well. Like, if you look at his desk, it has zero things apart from a computer. And the reason is, the more things that you have, like, this, I have a Superman thing this here, and that's the only thing I have in on my desk. So the minimal things that you can put on your desk, the minimal attractions, like, distractions that it will create. The other thing that I really find helpful, like you said, YouTube or any other social media, is that source of distraction. Like, if I get a message on somewhere, I feel like I have this dopamine level hit my brain, like, just respond or see what is in there and things like that. So these are some of the common sources of distractions. If you can cut them down, like, give yourself 2 hours of blocks where you can work, and just remove all of these distractions. That's how you can stay focused. And like, you already said this, like, promotion or any good rating or any good career will come out when you deliver business value. Like impact is number one. Like, if I go on to deliver, build some things that are like, worth less for a business, it's not going to get you a good promotion, irrespective of whether you work 40, 80, or like whole 168 hours of the week. So impact is definitely number one. So that is where I think a manager's responsibility comes in. Like you said, people leave bad managers 5 out of 10 times for it, rather than the company. Because a good manager, what they will do is they will create a systematic incentive structure that aligns with your personal goals, and that is one of the biggest area that I try to do as a leader as well. That I try to understand every individual's career aspiration or personal growth expectations, right? So you and me, we are at different place in life. We'll have different choices. We'll have different aspirations or different milestones that we want to achieve by certain age, certain whatever works for. So that is where I think humans are unique, and a leader needs to understand that. Like, it's not one size fits all. Like, you have this performance evaluation across 200,000 employees that you have, and that's not going to cut it. So you need to make sure that 10, like, I generally say if you have more than 10 direct reports, probably there's an issue with that. So people should focus on that part. Like, if you have 10 or less than 10 direct reports, go figure out, like, what are the things that each of them gets motivated by, and try to create a systematic structure of, like, let's say I wanted to get promoted faster. I wanted to get to a certain level by certain year, let's just say. So in that case, what my leader did was create a very structured step by step process. Like, this is where you are, these are your strengths, these are your weaknesses, and this is where you want to get to. So now there are n number of problems that are very impactful, that are valuable to the business. So what are some of them that interests you? So conversations should always start from there. And once you have those conversations, try to map some of these business objectives into your basically deliverables, and divide them into milestones. That's how you can be able to, you know uh, deliver impact, stay motivated, and at the same time you would be working with your leader throughout the process, and it's not going to be a surprise. Oh, why did I get this rating, or why was my promotion rejected?
You were regularly asking questions from your manager, and it becomes extremely difficult, especially for a bottom up approach, because at Google, decisions are taken from bottom to top. You give all the responsibilities to individual contributors, then managers. They try to drive the decision making process, and it goes up and up, right? That is the difference between bottom up and top down, right?
Right.
So now, especially in a bottom up company, people think that they have all the freedom. They are very shy to ask manager कि बताओ भाई कि please tell me how can I get promotion. So can you tell me what were the good questions you asked your manager every one-on-one session?
Yeah, so I think it goes back to what we were talking about. Like, it starts with that plan. It starts with you and your manager sitting down, having that conversation of, this is the work that I'm gonna be doing, and how is this helpful? For example, like, when I was mid-level engineer, right, L4, and I was having this conversation with my manager, how do I get to senior? So we would talk about a problem that our company or organization would have and would want to solve. And we would the very first thing we would do is evaluate it against, like, is it like an L5 problem, or is it an L4 problem, and things like that. So some of the times you would be doing the work that you that level at the level that you are at. So I would have some work that are L4, but I would try to maximize the work that are at L5 level. So at those situations, what ends up happening is you are stretching yourself beyond your capability at almost all the time. So it starts back with, like, these are my strengths, these are my weaknesses, and having those conversations with your manager, get some inputs from them, like, some of the areas that they think you should improve to get to the next level. So making this process objective makes it much better. Like, there's nothing left to interpretation, because every interpretation is going to be different. Let's say, like, people make switches, right? People leave. If your manager leaves tomorrow, it should not be very hard for the next person to come in and see where you are. And that is a lot of the cases. That is what happens, like, when a person leaves, or your manager leaves, or your team changes, your career gets reset, which is unfair. You did work for like, some amount of time, and you should be getting the credit for it. But that's where I say, like, having these conversations clearly. So one of the things I would do is, like, I would have bi-weekly one-on-ones with my manager. That is, every 2 weeks I would have 30 minutes one-on-one. And in that one-on-one, what I would have is, like, this is something that my leader came up with, is reserved 5 minutes for feedback at the end. And you can check out that template on my blog as well. I wrote 5 keys to one-on-ones, effective one-on-ones. Is the last piece is very important, the feedback piece. And the feedback is, like, most of the time we ask, like, what can I do better? And that's a very open-ended question, and you'd not most of the time get nothing out of it. Like, you'd get, like, you're doing just fine, you're great, like, this things went well. Because delivering on like, strong developmental feedback or constructive feedback is hard for everyone, because humans tend to be agreeable, and, like, to be perceived as not a threat, right? So some of the questions that you can ask is, like, once you have that list of attributes that you want to demonstrate for the next level, you can ask specifically, okay, this is where on project X, I was supposed to do Y, and that is one of the areas that I am supposed to improve. So how much do you think it got better, and how would you rate it against, let's say I'm going to L5, so how would you rate it against a regular L5 engineer? And having those specific questions would get you more actionable feedback, like things that you can work on immediately. So your manager would be like, okay, these are the 5 things that a typical senior engineer demonstrates, and you did 3 of those, but you're lacking in the rest of the two. So next time when you come across such an opportunity, like, in a similar situation, you'd be having those 2 things in mind, like, okay, I did 3 well, so I have to keep on doing those 3, and now I need to do these 2 things better. So having some of those specific questions and conversations would make it easier for the person, like your manager, to make it easy for them to help you.
Wow. So you have to have the growth mindset in every meeting. So the question should not be, you tell me, yaar, how can I do better in my performance? Tell me one thing I can do better. It should be, these are the 3 things I did. Tell me, considering me as a senior engineer, not an entry level, what you had in mind from a senior engineer point of view that senior would have done it, but I did not. Now, everything you can compare and reach on all of these 3 responsibilities. Because popular way of asking had been, tell me, am I meeting expectations? What are your expectations? This is very vague because expectations are only for a mid level or entry level engineer. You will never know the expectations of a senior level until you ask. So, very well played it out. And now, tell me the most difficult question you have ever asked your manager.
Well, yeah, that's an interesting. Let me think, because I think one of the things that I tend to do was, like, my goal was to make my manager's life easy, but I don't think I did. So yeah, I think I don't know if it was the most difficult question, but it was definitely most interesting one. Was, like, as soon as I got to the senior level at Google, the very first question that in the meeting that he announced, like, my promotion was approved, was, how do I get to L6? uh, so at the very first stage, so that took him a little bit to respond. And we had a very long conversation that day about, like, whether it's the right choice or not. But I think, from my perspective, I think always keeping my manager involved in the process of where I am and what my thought processes are, always will have questions that is going to be a little bit uncomfortable, or not really expected. So from that sense, I think that would be one of the tricky questions that he never expected that I would ask.
So the tricky part is like you just got promoted and up you're not thinking of celebrating it. You're like, okay, tell me how to go next. Because because your L5 is not shaped out, then there's no measurement point. So yeah, that makes sense. So now you said you love introspecting, right? So can you share for every promotion on a scale of 0 to 10, how much was luck, how much was smart work, how much was hard work, and how much was your transformative impacts, which we will define soon as well?
Okay, so just at a fundamental level, I think there are two things that goes into a promotion, right? One, I think you mentioned earlier in this chat. One is your impact and where you are. These are the things that you control, and then there is this business decision. Most of the time, most of us will find ourselves in a job working for a for-profit organization. So it's a business. So every decision that it takes is a business decision. Whether to promote you is going to cost them, I don't know, $100,000 or more every year. So it's a business decision. So you need to have that understanding and appreciation of every rating, every promotion that you are going to get is going to be a business decision, and there is going to be some portion of it that is attributed to that luck, right? And how you can combat that is the things that you said. You can do smart work, and smart work does not necessarily mean you are intellectually high IQ person or something like that. It can be as simple as sitting down with your manager, strategically create a path. For example, let's say you are going from L4 to L5 at Google. I'm taking the levels from levels.fyi. If you're going from a mid-level to a senior engineer at Google, you can sit down with your manager, create these are the projects that I'm going to do over the next 1.5 to 2.5 years, and these are the attributes that I'm going to be demonstrating. So as much as you spend these time making your case, I think your chances of success goes high. So to rate my promotions, the first promotion that I got, I would say I worked a lot in that period of time. So I think that was my first promotion. I think, to be honest, now that I think, I got my first promotion 1 year into my job at Google, and out of that 1 year, I felt very unproductive first 2 months because I was feeling oh my God, what's happening? So I think there's a lot that lot of luck that went into it for sure, because my first rating that I got ever at Google was strongly exceeds expectation. And there's when you join at any company, for example, whether it's Google, Meta, Apple, Microsoft, wherever, I think the standard is the first cycle you are expected to be onboarding. So you can't have your impacts will be very minimal. So you'd get that middle rating that most of the people get. So at that time at Google, it was consistently meets expectations. So I did get that SEE, and I would say it was something that my leader or manager did well in terms of his convincing power. So I was definitely lucky to have him as a manager throughout my journey, my growth journey, because I think one of the things he did pretty well was being very objective and creating these arguments, spending time with you before having those meetings with their peers in terms of discussing what is the ratings and things like that, is to create that story, right? You need to be able to tell that story well. So some of the times you'd be fortunate to have a very strong leader like that. Some of the times you won't. So one of the things my manager suggested when I was making this transition was irrespective of who your manager is, take ownership of that process, right? Write your own story, tell it in a way that affects business, and someone who is sitting higher up, like at a director level, or someone who should be seeing this and saying, okay, yes, that matters to me and that is deserved. So I think luck is definitely there, but there are some things that are in your control. So I think focusing on some of these parts is very important. So I'll tell you a story about a very close friend. He's my best friend, and he also works at Google right now even. So he got his promotion denied uh, last cycle, And he did everything perfectly. He did everything very well. His manager was fully supportive. However, at the end, it was rejected because they didn't have the budget for it. So they already promoted the fixed number of people that they wanted to, or they could promote that year, and he was not promoted. So he was pretty sad. We were having these conversations, and then I was like, you did everything that you could have done, and this part is something that is beyond your control. So I think keep on doing what you're doing, and you will get it next time, because it's not going to happen to you every time. So I think it is important to recognize that there are some parts that are beyond your control, which you we can attribute to luck. But for I would say don't bother about those areas, because just focus on your part, because otherwise what ends up happening is you focus way too much on the things that you can't control, and then you obsess over them. Then your ability to contribute to the area that you control basically goes down, and that's just gives more power to luck.
Now, you got highest rating at Google because of your transformative impact. Now, people in the engineering world do not understand that because they just know कि code अच्छे से करना है, performance should be best, there should be good unit test, good coverage. But transformative impact has a lot to do on the business side as well. So, can you define transformative impact? How much of that is like just coding? How much of that is business? Because it's all about business, as you said.
Yes, yeah. So I think I'm not sure, to be honest, like, what transformative impact was defined as. Like that was the new highest rating that they introduced recently. Before it used to be superb. And basically, what these ratings are trying to do is these ratings are given to less than 2% at a given performance cycle, and across Google. And what they are trying to do is they are trying to identify people who had delivered a lot of impact to the business, and that made that business unit, for example, visible to other parts of the organization. So I'll tell you what I did to when I got this transformative impact. So I was working on Chrome's build infrastructure, and at that time I was working to make this build pipeline and secure end to end. So we were developing solutions, software, systems and tools to support this goal. I'm trying to make sure that I don't disclose anything. Okay, so yeah, we were trying to build this secure Chrome build pipeline, and some of it was open source, some of it wasn't, and a lot of the work that we did translated well to some other teams at across Google. So my focus has always been like, how do I make this work transportable, so that, for example, if I work for it in Chrome, then it can be picked up by another team, let's say Android, and they can use it as well. So that is where I started thinking. That was not my objective. Like, that was not my goal. That was not my OKR, but that is how I thought about it. Like, the impact comes not just, so this is something I keep on saying, the people that I mentor is like, if you are within a same company, if it has a same public symbol, like ticker symbol on New York Stock Exchange, everything is your problem. Nothing is going to be that team's problem. Okay, that's not my problem. I think that is the first fundamental thing that needs to be changed. Like, we tend to work inside a team, and like, we come across a bug, and the very first thing that comes to our mind, okay, this is the dependency that I'm using, so it's not my problem, I'll reach out to them. So a lot of these time, I think once we shift that changing, like, if you are within, like, for example, if I am working for Google, I don't care whether I'm at Chrome, I don't care whether I'm at ads. All of those things contribute to a single profit and loss and single stock price going up and down. So I think that is the fundamental difference that I was thinking at that time. I was like, I work for Chrome. I want to solve it for Chrome. However, I want to make the solution portable so that other teams can benefit from it who are not Chrome. So they are not paying my salary in terms of the SVP or the VP whose budget was like, paying my salary. But at the same time, I would focus on those things, because I think that's how the efficiency is created, right? At a very large organization, you'd see multiple teams doing the same work, and that is where, like, let's say if you pay 100,000 for a single developer, developers in two different teams, you are paying $1 million. And if the five engineers working on the same problem makes it portable, you just saved 50% of that, like $500,000, right? So things like that makes a lot of difference. And the solution that we built, a majority of the chunk was taken by other teams and adopted by other teams. So I think that is where I got about 50 teams adopt our solution, which was basically like, meant like all those rest of the 49 teams didn't have to do the work that I did. So not I did, sorry, I take it back. My team, our team did. So that is the difference that probably got the transformative impact. But at the same time, I know my manager fought very hard to get that rating. It's very hard in some of those conversations. So I want to attribute a huge chunk of finding the right? Yes, exactly. The huge his contributions were definitely a lot. So I don't want to discount that either. So yeah, I mean, a lot of these things basically probably makes it a transformative impact, but I don't know whether it's gonna reproduce. Like, I don't know if I do the same thing again, if it would work or not. So there's no, what I'm trying to say is there is no formula to get the highest rating or the transformative impact. I think it is business dependent. Some of the times maybe doing the exact opposite would get you transformative impact, who knows. But the idea is always think about we are a one team, we are solving this problem, and then how do I make it scale? How do I make it scale beyond a certain level?
This is like the mind blowing moment for me because I never thought that way because teams are divided कि ये आपका काम है ये आप करो, but I never thought that if you impact the neighboring team as well and other teams as well, if you try to work on something which is helping the whole company as much as possible, it becomes transformative. So now half of that impact you make is not just about working. You work silently, work in silence, and no one would know that Akash did it. So how do you make sure that your work is heard? You are heard. क्योंकि कुछ लोग कहते हैं ना, you have to butter up your manager as well and do work as well. That's how it works in big tech. You have to take credit. No one can get promoted in silence. So can you share how you create that balance?
Yeah, I think there's this fundamental thing, as we enter the industry, I think one of the things we think about is I'm gonna write the best code. I'm gonna write the code that will never, I will write the system that will not have bugs, and my work will speak for itself. While that is good, like you pay attention to quality, I think visibility becomes very, very important. And the reason visibility is important is because, like you said, a team, the people who are attributing some of these ratings, some of these growths, or making these decisions, do not uh, get to see who is writing what code, right? So thinking about being a face, so I think how I think about it is when I joined I joined Chrome team, I got lucky, as I said, I was the first one to join, so I got to be the face of a lot of the problem space. So it but it wasn't it wasn't untrue for others who joined our team either. Everybody who joined our team, I think our leader did a very good job in terms of attributing work areas and identifying owners and making that visible outside our team. And that is something I think leaders or managers should start doing if they are not already. Think about what is under your team's charter and identify individuals for each of those places. I think Apple also does have a very similar way of dealing with things. Like, they identify individuals who are responsible for certain things, and that is how you get that visibility outside of your immediate team. So when someone has a problem, for example, when I was at Chrome, someone would have a problem with this build pipeline and things like that, they would immediately know, okay, this Akash is the right person to go to. So I think having investing some time in building that relationship outside your team, being that face outside your team, is going to be the crucial part. Being visible is very important. I think the other areas that I always participated was I would always participate. There's million events goes on, like in big tech especially, like, right, like you go on to have like this 3 day virtual events where, like, people are giving lightning talks, 5 minute talks and things like that. So I would always participate in all of those things and try to present my work, like, be it 30 seconds, be it 1 minute, 5 minute, whatever it is. I'd always show up there with my work, trying to demonstrate some of the things that we did, and like basically be that face.
Wow, very well said. Because in demos, wherever you can have a higher manager, right? Hiring or a higher up manager who is like, let's say, manager of manager or manager of manager of manager, it is a great opportunity because if you are already familiar with the senior manager, they would know when people's discussion or promotions discussion are brought up. Oh, I know Akash. So, like, it becomes a familiar face. Now, next, let's move on to when you became tech lead. It's extremely rare to become tech lead in 3.5 years, how you achieved it. So, can you tell me when you became tech lead, how did your responsibilities change and did you enjoy it?
Yeah, yeah. So I think the part that was like, I got a little lucky there, becoming the tech lead, and the reason is I was the first hire for the team. So my manager started this team back in 2019 towards the end of the year, and he was making hires. And at that time, I was like, there, just right place, right time, I guess. And I was the first person to join the team, start on the team. So I got to experience a lot of those, initial days exploration. Like, yeah, like we talked about, like onboarding is difficult, right? So I had spent about 4 or 5 months before the next person joined, and at that time I already had some of the context. So in essence, I started becoming the tech lead towards the first, like, end of my first year at Google. So I was already leading projects, I was already leading the team, I was already having people on board and like help them on board and all those things. So I got lucky in that sense. I was nothing special. uh, but once I got to the tech lead, one of the biggest challenges that I had was there was a period of a month where I felt very, very unproductive, because a TL's job, the top job for a TL, is to make sure that their team has the most exciting work that aligns with their interests. So TL is basically the introduction to leadership, right? Uh, I kind of take it back. And the reason is I like to believe everybody is a leader, and that's where growth happens. Like when you start thinking like a leader, irrespective of whether you're a lead, you have an official title of lead or not. But tech lead is basically when some of these expectations starts to change from the corporate perspective. Like, their expectation from you is not anymore how many lines of codes that you're writing, how many changes that you land, or how many features that you launch. At that point it becomes, what are the all the things that your team did over the last 1 year or something like that. So I think that is where I struggled a lot, because when I became the TL, one of the basic thing that I tried to do was I tried to make sure that everybody else liked to work with me. And so what ends up happening in that situation is you get a problem from, like, coming your way, or you see that problem to be solved for your team or organization. At that time, you break it down, you create some interesting problems to solve, you go to your team, speak with your team, and see, knowing their competencies, you would have an idea where, each of them will fit, but you let them make that decision, right? So you let them choose uh, what they feel, empowered to contribute to. So once these pickings happen, you are left with not much exciting work. So what ends up happening, you feel like as a contributor, I'm not a manager, so I am a lead and I am not writing pretty stuff anymore. I am just doing band-aid work. I am doing most of the code reviews, design reviews, and all those higher level stuff. And you feel like it gets very hard to evaluate what you did for yourself. So I am pretty big on self evaluation. I tend to every week on Friday I tend to see what I did and how much of that compares to what I expected at the start of the week. And these metrics would just not work when I started becoming the lead, because I had nothing to show for it. I was like, I had bunch of conversations, I had bunch of meetings with my team members and things like that to unblock, to get them, unblock them in their work or their areas wherever they got stuck. But I have nothing, because one of the things I proactively made sure that I don't do is to steal credit for someone else. So if my team members were working on a problem, I would never say something in terms of to get any accolades for that particular piece of work, because that is not something I did. So this was a biggest struggle. I was not feeling productive, so I went to my manager and asked, like, this is what's happening. I have no idea how to feel, how to get into this role. So that is where one of the things he suggested is, like, there's a subtle difference between expectations from an IC and a leader. Tech lead is the entry to the leadership ladder in our corporate America, if I may call it. But yeah, that's the entry level to your leadership ladder. So basically, as a tech lead, one of the things that you want to ensure is your team feels empowered to do their work. They are very good at it. They Your role is to create that environment where they can feel free to contribute at their own pace, at their own interest, and all of those things. Your job is to make sure that they are not unblocked and you are helping them achieve what they really want for themselves. So once I started understanding and appreciating this shift, I like completely was like, in shock in terms of how much of happiness that brings to me. Like, when I could help someone, like, it happened numerous times, like, someone from the team got stuck on a problem, then I got to jump in and try to help, try to debug those situations and get it out. So I think those at the end of, like, we'd spend 2 hours pair programming or trying to screen share and see what's happening, and at the end of the 2 hours, if we can unblock them, it it made me feel like, very, very productive, although there were nothing very objective about it to be captured. So from a perspective of how you feel productive as a tech lead, that is what helped me. And from a performance evaluation perspective, it's a little bit different. There's a subtle difference, because I spent 2 hours on pair programming is not going to be on your self evaluation on your performance, but we can talk more about that.
Growth is very important for these big tech companies. I was reading a survey that at Meta, most of the people who got laid off were the people who did not get promoted in consecutive 2 years. So there is a lot of pressure that if you don't get promoted, you will be kicked out. So also there is pressure that when you turn 40 or maybe later, you cannot code. You need to grow. You need to come out of that coding position and you want to be a lead so that you can direct people but not code, because your mindset will not allow that as productively. So can you add on to that?
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate. I didn't know that statistics that most of the people who got laid off were not promoted in the last 2 years. It's just it's a very sensitive subject in the tech area, like the economy that we are in, that people are losing their jobs and their livelihood. So it's really hard, right? So the situation is, I think it goes back to, like, you have this pressure on your back that you need to grow, and unless you are growing, so I think some of these things are also if we think about it, uh, performance is, or never, probably a lot of the times, is not the reason to be laid off, is what I think personally. Is a lot of these decisions are made at the level of, like, is this business unit adding value to me? As the, leader, let's say you are the SVP of an organization, what you'll probably be asking is, instead of whether this person got promoted or not, I think what you would be asking is, these are a group of 5 people working on this particular problem. Do I care about this problem? And the problem with big tech, especially seeing a lot of these layoffs, is big tech is a place where there are a lot of people doing a lot of great work, but at the same time, big tech is able to maintain that position because they do a lot of experimentation, right? They do a lot of, moonshot projects that probably would never see the day of light. However, during this economic time, what every leader is trying to go for is efficiency. Everybody wants every team to contribute to that top line, and that just doesn't go well with, like, what it used to have. So that you end up with a lot of teams doing a lot of exploratory interesting work that probably could have made you $1 billion next year, but you don't have the appetite to do it anymore. So I think of it that way, like, probably, growth is really, really important. I think as a human being, you should be growing all the time. I think one of the things personally I believe is, like, I would stop growing the day I die. Until that point, I would want to grow every day. I want to get better from what I was yesterday, and I want to be better tomorrow than what I am today. So that is a fundamental thinking, and I think it is a good thing to have, that will keep you moving towards the future and, like, always stay relevant. But I honestly have no idea of, like, how this applies to this layoff environment.
But to add on, आपने बताया था कि when you become tech lead, growing up is extremely difficult. Now, how do you see your vision in the next few years? How are you preparing for the age of 40 and beyond? Like, how do you see your career path after?
Yeah, so I think as a leader, one of the things, like, fundamentally, like, one of the things that came my way as an opportunity was to be able to manage. I have declined becoming a manager 2 times so far, and the reason is I feel like I would not do justice to the people that I manage. I want to make sure that I am not a leader that people complain to their friends about, and I don't take it lightly, because as a leader, that is the main source of motivation that came behind writing leadership letters, to be honest, is that I want uh, engineering to be fun. Engineering is supposed to be fun, and majority of the existing way of leadership, I think, is fundamentally flawed in the way that you want to get the most out of your team. That is a fundamentally wrong question to ask. uh, what you want to have is to create the environment for them, for your team to do the best work. So this fundamental shift is something I want to ensure that I do well before I take on a manager role. So that is where, and I love to code, to be honest. I don't know when I'm going to quit coding, but even I think this trend is pretty new. Is like, if you look at most of the companies, and especially big techs, managers are expected to code. Even if you're a manager, it doesn't matter. Like, you are expected to do coding like at least 30% of your time. Uh, I think Meta did a lot of publicly spoken about Meta spoke about this particular issue. Like, everybody needs to code, and that used to be true at Google as well. Like, my manager wrote code all the time. He would have his OKR, in addition to all the people management that he would be doing. So I do see, like, I do see myself growing as a leader. So probably in the next role that I would take, I don't know when, but in that position I would probably be going for a role which is close to the tech, but as well as having some leadership responsibilities, because I feel a lot more ready in terms of, like, being able to not be completely hopeless for the people that I'd be leading. And one of the things I also recognized is leadership is a learnable skill. And the biggest change happens for every leader is when they acknowledge that they need to learn, or, like, be a student of this subject for the entirety of the period that they want to be a leader. And the reason is fundamentally human, a leader is leading humans, right? So, and humans are completely unique. Like, you and I will have different thought process and how we think about things. And if you and I are teammates and the leader is leading us, like, how he needs to lead, he or she needs to lead you versus me is going to be completely different. And maybe his or her the leader's leadership style does not align well with mine, but it aligns well with you. So that doesn't mean he's a good or bad leader. So that's why I keep on saying there's not really good or bad leader. It's just some people do not recognize that leadership is something that they need to adjust based on their reports. rather than they think about like, there are some good right ways to do it and there are some wrong ways. There are some areas which is binary, like 0 or 1. Something you should not do is like, constantly stand over your reports desk and then ask for update every 1 minute. That is definitely a no. But sometimes, like, yeah, if you think about it, it's funny, right? Like, let's say a person is going through a very, very difficult time in their life and they are struggling with pretty much everything. So a leader's responsibility is to make sure, like, approach them with like, and do you want me to sit with you and then do these things, right? That might be a good thing to do. So there is literally nothing that is wrong or right in leadership. I think that is where I want to be. I want to grow every day as a leader. I want to learn new things. I want to be challenged on, like, these are some of these things that you don't do right, like, get those feedback and improve every day. So how or where I see myself at 40 years is probably doing the same thing, leading and enjoying leadership and learning new skills.
Very well said. It's a completely new mindset, because many people think ki if I don't become leader now, I won't be able to improve later. Because earlier you start, the better you become. But I totally agree to your point, because the flexibility we get being engineers is never gonna happen later. Because as a leader, you have to sit there 9 to 5. All the meetings are supposed to be 9 to 5, but flexibility we get is just mind blowing. Because you also said in your in your articles that the flexibility gives you breaks in between coding, and you are able to justify कि यार 2 hours later you can go pick up your kids, or go to go take a break, go walk, and then code later. So this gives you more ideas and more room to be creative.
Yes, that is absolutely true. One of the things I keep on saying is leadership is hard. It is a stressful job, and if and it's a choice. Like I think, but I listened to someone's podcast. I can't remember who, but that person mentions, like, for example, he compares leadership with parenting. I think, like, parenting is a choice. You don't have to be a parent, and it goes similarly with leadership. You don't have to be a leader. You choose to be a leader, knowing that it's going to be difficult, but it will have its good moments as well. So I think knowing that and acknowledging that and being ready for all the challenges that comes with being a leader is something that needs to be, like, accepted more widely. It's not a ladder. Leadership, I highly advocate against thinking leadership as a ladder. You can grow as an individual contributor. Leadership is rooted in every role that you do. Probably uh, 6 months into your junior level engineer role, you would be expecting to lead some of the aspects of your job as well. So everybody is a leader, and this, like, the leadership roles that your company probably has is not a ladder. You can become a parallel person who does a job very well and still be respected and not be a leader. So I think these decisions need to be made in the way of, like, I want to be that. I know this job is going to be hard, but it's going to have its good moments as well.
Now my final question would be, in the era of AI and security, what would be the advice you would give so that people can go faster and use all the technology and tools they have available?
Yeah, I mean, one of the fundamental things that AI is enabling us to do is do things faster and more efficiently. However, there is this false notion that is available out there. I don't think it's a breaking news anymore that AI is going to take our jobs. I fundamentally don't think that is AI or the technology is there yet to take our jobs, and it is very important to recognize AI is not. So humans are not building AI to demolish society. It is there to augment humans' life, to make things faster, to do things faster, to find cure to things that we don't have time in our lifetime. So we should start thinking about AI as an partner rather than this threat. And how there's a lot of powerful technologies that I anticipate will be revealed or, like, unveiled in front of us over the next 12 to 18 months that will be able to change our lives in ways for the better. And a lot of the efficiencies come when we have a implicit trust on our AI. So for example, we can talk about simply, like, Let's talk about you have an AI assistant personally for you that is doing your work. For example, let's say booking a hotel and like ordering your medicine or whatever, right? So one of the things that you'd want to have, for example, if it has access to your email, for instance, then one of the things you'd want to be confident about is it's not going to send your boss an email saying I quit. I don't think we have that confidence today. So we need to be there. So I think one of the things that I tend to take a lot of interest is to make this AI secure inherently, and that is going to be a lot focus across the companies. Like I think all of these companies like OpenAI, Anthropic, Google, DeepMind, everybody is paying a very good amount of attention towards making these technologies safe to use, and we would be able to see a like improvements in our daily lives is what I honestly think is like the efficiency will go up. However, there's need to be this safety or the trust issue that needs to be resolved. I really don't think that exists today.
Very well said. Like, we have to take it as a tool no matter what, and we have to use it. Like, I think, like, humans push against the change. When AI came, like, people were not able to accept it for a few months, but when people see other people using it, then only they use. It's a normal, normal default behavior. When seat belts came, people were like, we will not wear seat belts. In New York City, that happened in 1990s. And now it's like, if you don't wear, you are awkward. So same as the case is going to happen with AI. And for example, Google's 2 million context window, you can put 10 to 15 Python libraries at once, or even more than that, and it can learn and code using all those libraries at once. A human can never learn 10 libraries even in a week or even in a month.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That is true. I think the context window is going to play a key role in the future. I think Google's former CEO Eric Schmidt talked about it pretty recently, being one of the three things that how AI is going to change things. And I think I really resonated with what he had to say. Was like what he said in that interview was that what we do as humans is basically do recipes, right? We are finding recipes for doing things. It can be like cooking a food, it can be making a software. For everything, it is broken down into smaller steps. And with what context window helps you is basically to have these conversations fed into itself and build recipes for complex problems. And that is where, if we can get some help, we would be able to use it to our advantage. We might be able to find cure for cancer. We might be able to find cure for rare diseases that we don't know how it happens. So it's a lot of the publicity that is out there commercially is towards AI is going to replace your job, AI is going to take away your livelihood. But I think we need to start seeing as AI as a companion rather than a competitor.
Totally. So awesome. Wonderful talking to you, Akash. It was so mind blowing and also transformative for me. It made a transformative impact in my life for sure. I learned a lot from you. I hope people continue to learn from you as well through your blogs, and I'll definitely leave them in the description below. And thank you so much for your time.
Thanks a lot for having me, and it was really great chatting with you and talking about a lot of these things.
Awesome. Thank you.